Lisa had been traveling for what felt like forever. 18 hours of buses, trains, and now finally an airport terminal that seemed to stretch on endlessly. Her legs felt like they were made of lead, and every step took more effort than the last. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a proper meal. Airport coffee and a stale muffin from somewhere, in Ohio, were all that had kept her going for the past day. The 23-year-old clutched her old canvas purse against her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. To her it was. Inside that worn bag was everything that mattered. A few crumpled dollar bills, her identification, and photographs of the one person who made all this suffering worthwhile. She just needed to make it to the next gate. Just a few more steps. Then she could sit down, catch her breath, and figure out her next move. But her body had other plans. The airport lights started to blur together, creating strange halos around everything. The sounds of rolling suitcases and overhead announcements became muffled, like she was underwater. Lisa tried to focus on putting one foot in front of the other, but the ground seemed to tilt beneath her. She reached out for something to steady herself, but there was nothing there. People rushed past her in every direction, absorbed in their own worlds. Everyone had somewhere important to be. No one noticed the pale young woman in the faded jeans and oversized sweater who was clearly struggling. No one saw her stumble. No one saw her knees buckle, and then Lisa collapsed. Her body hit the polished airport floor with a dull thud near gate 47. Her purse fell from her grip, and its contents scattered across the tiles. A few people glanced over but kept walking. In a busy airport, someone sitting on the floor wasn't unusual enough to warrant more than a passing look. They probably thought she was just another tired traveler taking a break in an inconvenient spot. But this was different. Lisa wasn't sitting. She was completely unconscious. Across the terminal, 42-year-old Daniel Chen was walking briskly toward his connecting gate. The businessman had just returned from a conference in Singapore and was already mentally preparing for the mountain of work waiting for him back in New York. His assistant walked beside him, rattling off meeting times and quarterly figures while Daniel reviewed reports on his tablet. He had built his pharmaceutical company from the ground up over the past 15 years. Chen Pharmaceuticals was now a major player in the industry, and Daniel's schedule reflected his success. Every minute was accounted for. Every decision calculated. He lived in a world of board meetings, shareholder calls, and strategic planning sessions. Personal life had taken a backseat years ago, somewhere between his divorce and his meteoric rise to the top of his field. Daniel was about to swipe to the next report when he heard something that made him stop. It wasn't loud, just the subtle sound of something hitting the floor. But something about it felt different. Wrong. He looked up from his tablet and saw a young woman crumpled on the ground about 20 feet away, her belongings scattered around her. Without thinking, Daniel handed his tablet to his assistant and rushed over. His business instincts gave way to basic human concern. He knelt down beside the unconscious woman, his expensive suit jacket brushing against the airport floor. He checked her pulse. It was there, but weak. Her skin was cold and clammy to the touch. "Call for medical help," Daniel told his assistant sharply. "Now." While his assistant dialed emergency services, Daniel tried to make sure the young woman was in a safe position. He noticed how thin she was, how worn her clothes looked. Her face was peaceful despite the circumstances, but there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. Other travelers were starting to gather now, forming a small circle of concerned onlookers. A security guard jogged over, speaking into his radio. Daniel assured him that medical help was already on the way. He then noticed the young woman's belongings scattered across the floor, at risk of being kicked away or trampled by the growing crowd. He started gathering her things carefully. A small wallet with hardly any cash inside, a chapstick, a crumpled receipt, some loose change, and then his hand closed around a photograph that had slipped out of her wallet. Daniel picked up the photo, intending to just tuck it back into her purse with everything else. But when he glanced at the image, his entire world stopped. It was a picture of a baby boy, maybe 2 or 3 years old. The child had a bright smile and dark curly hair, but it wasn't the smile or the hair that made Daniel freeze. It was the birthmark. Right there on the baby's left cheek was a distinctive crescent moon-shaped birthmark. Daniel's hands began to tremble. The photograph slipped from his fingers and he had to grab it again before it fell. His face drained of all color. His breath caught in his throat. That birthmark. He knew that birthmark. It was impossible. It couldn't be. But there it was, staring back at him from the photograph. Daniel's grandmother had the same birthmark in the exact same spot. It was a rare familial trait that had been passed down through generations of his family. His mother didn't have it, but his grandmother did. And according to genetics, there was a chance his children could inherit it. A distinctive, unmistakable crescent moon shape on the left cheek. For 3 years, Daniel had been haunted by dreams of a child with that birthmark. A child he had never met. A child who might exist somewhere in the world. Dreams that had started after a brief relationship ended abruptly when he had to leave Boston for a family emergency. Dreams of a son he feared he might have but could never find. He had hired private investigators. He had spent countless hours and resources trying to track down the woman from Boston, but she had vanished without a trace. Eventually, people told him to let it go. It was probably nothing, just guilt and wishful thinking manifesting as dreams. But the dreams never stopped, and neither did the feeling that somewhere out there, he had a child he had never met, and now, holding this photograph in his shaking hands, Daniel felt like the universe had just answered a question he'd been asking for years. Airport paramedics arrived with a stretcher and medical equipment. They quickly assessed Lisa's condition and determined she was suffering from severe dehydration and dangerously low blood sugar. They prepared to move her to the airport medical center for treatment. Daniel stood up, still clutching the photograph, and told the paramedics he would accompany them. His assistant looked confused. They had a meeting in 3 hours. There was a car waiting outside. The quarterly reports needed review, but Daniel didn't care about any of that right now. "Cancel everything," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving the photograph. "Sir?" his assistant asked, bewildered. "Cancel everything. I need to talk to this woman when she wakes up." His assistant started to protest, but one look at Daniel's face silenced any objections. In 15 years of working together, he had never seen his boss look like this. There was something in Daniel's expression, a mixture of hope, fear, and desperate need, that made it clear this wasn't up for discussion. As they loaded the unconscious young woman onto the stretcher, Daniel walked beside them, still holding the photograph of the little boy with the crescent moon birthmark. He didn't know who this woman was or how she had come to possess this picture. But he knew with absolute certainty that this moment was going to change his life forever. The answers he had been searching for might finally be within reach, and he wasn't going to let this chance slip away. Lisa's eyes fluttered open slowly. The harsh fluorescent lights made her squint, and for a moment she had no idea where she was. This wasn't the airport terminal. The sounds were different, quieter, more controlled. She could hear the steady beep of medical equipment and smell the distinct scent of antiseptic. Her head felt heavy, and her mouth was incredibly dry. As her vision came into focus, she realized she was lying on a bed in what looked like a small medical room. An IV line was attached to her arm, delivering fluids into her system. A paramedic stood nearby, checking a monitor. "Welcome back," the paramedic said with a kind smile. "You gave us quite a scare. You collapsed in the terminal from dehydration and low blood sugar. When's the last time you ate a proper meal?" Lisa tried to remember. Yesterday morning? The day before? Everything had blurred together during her desperate journey across the country. She attempted to sit up, but the paramedic gently pressed her shoulder back down. "Take it easy. You need to rest. We've got fluids running, and your vitals are improving, but you're not out of the woods yet." That's when Lisa noticed him. A man in an expensive-looking suit sat in the corner of the small room. He was watching her intently, and there was something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Concern, yes, but also something else. Something that looked almost like fear mixed with hope. Daniel stood up slowly as soon as he saw she was awake. He had been sitting in that chair for nearly 40 minutes waiting. His mind had been racing the entire time, running through scenarios, possibilities, and questions he desperately needed answers to. Now that she was conscious, he didn't quite know how to begin. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the photograph. Lisa's eyes immediately locked onto it, and her expression changed from confusion to panic in an instant. "Where did you get that?" Her voice was hoarse, but the protective edge was unmistakable. "You dropped it when you collapsed," Daniel said carefully, taking a step closer. "I was just trying to help. I gathered your things so they wouldn't get lost in the crowd." Lisa tried to sit up again, ignoring the paramedics' protests. She reached out and snatched the photograph from Daniel's hand, clutching it against her chest like someone had tried to steal her most valuable possession. In a way, they had. That photo was one of the few things keeping her going. "Why are you still here?" Lisa demanded, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Who are you?" Daniel took a deep breath. He knew he had to be careful here. This young woman was clearly protective of the child in that photograph, and he was a complete stranger. But he couldn't just walk away, not now. Not after seeing that birthmark. "My name is Daniel. I'm the one who found you when you collapsed. And I stayed because I need to ask you something about that photograph, about the child in it." "That's none of your business," Lisa shot back. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was firm. "Thank you for helping me, but I need to go. I have somewhere important to be." She started pulling at the IV line, but the paramedic quickly intervened. "Ma'am, you're in no condition to go anywhere. You need at least another hour of fluids, and then you should eat something before you even think about leaving." "I don't have another hour," Lisa said, her voice breaking slightly. "I don't have time." "He doesn't have time." Those last words hung in the air. Daniel caught the desperation behind them, the fear. This wasn't just about protecting the child's identity. Something was wrong. "Something serious, please," Daniel said softly, pulling up a chair next to her bed. "Just hear me out. I know this sounds crazy and you have no reason to trust me, but that birthmark on the child's cheek, the crescent moon shape, I need to know who he is." Lisa stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "What are you talking about? Why would you possibly care about a birthmark?" Daniel ran his hand through his hair, trying to find the right words. "How do you explain something like this to a stranger? How do you tell someone that you think their child might be your son based on a dream and a family trait?" "That birthmark," he began slowly, "it's rare. Very rare. It runs in my family. My grandmother had it in the exact same spot. I've been having dreams about a child with that mark for 3 years now. Ever since—" He trailed off, uncertain how much to share. Lisa's expression shifted from defensive to confused. She looked down at the photograph, then back at Daniel. "You're not making any sense. You think you know this boy because of some birthmark? I think he might be my son." The words came out quieter than Daniel intended, but they filled the small room like a thunderclap. Lisa's eyes went wide. The paramedic, who had been pretending not to listen, glanced over with obvious interest. "That's impossible," Lisa whispered. But even as she said it, her mind was racing. Could it be? Could this man be the one her sister had run from all those years ago? Daniel leaned forward, his hands clasped together. 4 years ago, I was in Boston on business. I met a woman there. She was working at a hotel. We spent about a week together, and it was special, real, different from anything I'd experienced in a long time. But then I got a call that my mother had a stroke and I had to leave immediately. When I tried to contact her afterward, she was gone. Completely vanished. I hired investigators. I searched for months. But it was like she'd disappeared off the face of the earth. Lisa felt her breath catch in her throat. Boston. 4 years ago. Hotel housekeeper. Her sister had been living in Boston 4 years ago, working at a hotel. And she'd come home pregnant, refusing to talk about the father. Refusing to even give a name. What was her name? Lisa asked quietly. "This woman you were looking for." "Claire," Daniel said. "Claire Rodriguez." Lisa closed her eyes. There it was. The confirmation she hadn't wanted to hear. This wealthy, powerful-looking businessman sitting in front of her was the father her sister had run from. The man her sister had made her promise never to look for. "Where is she?" Daniel asked urgently. "Where is Claire? And the boy in the picture, is he—" "His name is Tommy," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's 3 years old, and my sister Claire died 6 months ago." The color drained from Daniel's face. He had known somewhere deep down that Claire might be gone. The investigators had eventually turned up a death certificate, but without more details. He hadn't been sure it was the same person. Now he knew. The woman he had spent a week with, the woman he had tried so hard to find, was dead, and she'd left behind a son. His son. "I'm so sorry," Daniel managed to say. "I'm so sorry. I looked for her. I tried to find her. If I had known she was pregnant, if I had known about Tommy." "She didn't want to be found," Lisa said, tears starting to stream down her face. She was scared. When she found out she was pregnant and learned who you really were, she panicked. She grew up in foster care, bouncing from home to home. She didn't trust wealthy people. She thought you'd either think she was after your money or you'd try to take the baby away from her. So she ran. She made me promise never to look for you, never to tell Tommy about his father. But you're here now, Daniel said gently. You're traveling across the country. Something changed. Lisa looked down at the photograph of Tommy, her thumb tracing the outline of his little face. He's sick. Really sick. He has this rare blood disorder called Fanconi anemia. The doctors in Montana couldn't help him. He needs a bone marrow transplant from someone who's a genetic match. I got tested, but I'm not compatible. I've been traveling to different hospitals begging someone to help, trying to find donors, but her voice broke completely. He's dying, and I can't save him. I've tried everything, and I can't save him. Daniel felt like someone had punched him in the chest. He had a son he'd never met, a son who was dying. The dreams that had haunted him for 3 years suddenly made horrifying sense. It wasn't just guilt or imagination. It was something deeper, a connection to a child he'd never known existed. Where is he now? Daniel asked, his voice thick with emotion. With a neighbor back in Montana. I had to leave him there because I couldn't afford to bring him with me. I've been going from hospital to hospital, trying to find someone who could help, trying to find funding, trying to find anything. But I'm running out of time. The doctor said he has maybe 2 months left without treatment. Daniel stood up abruptly, pulling out his phone. His assistant answered on the first ring. I need you to charter a private medical jet to Montana immediately and contact Dr. Richardson at the hospital. Tell her I need a complete medical team on standby for a pediatric case. Also get legal on the phone. I need emergency DNA testing arranged. Lisa watched in confusion as this stranger started making rapid-fire calls, mobilizing resources she couldn't even dream of affording. What are you doing? Daniel looked at her with an intensity that took her breath away. I'm saving my son. As his biological father, I'm the most likely bone marrow match. But first we need to confirm through DNA testing that Tommy is mine. Not because I doubt it, but because the doctors will need that proof. Then we're going to get him the best medical care money can buy. I can't afford any of this, Lisa said helplessly. I don't have insurance. I don't have money. I can barely afford bus tickets. You don't need money, Daniel said firmly. Tommy is my son. I'll take care of everything. But right now we need to get to Montana as fast as possible. Can you travel? The paramedic checked Lisa's vitals and nodded. With continued fluids and some food, she should be okay for the flight. Lisa looked at this man who had appeared out of nowhere and was suddenly offering everything she'd been desperately searching for. Part of her wanted to be suspicious, to question his motives, to protect Tommy the way her sister would have wanted. But another part of her, the part that had watched Tommy get weaker every day, that had held him during treatments, that had promised him everything would be okay even when she knew it might not be, that part couldn't afford to refuse help. Okay, she whispered. Let's go save Tommy. The private jet was nothing like Lisa had ever experienced. Leather seats that felt like clouds, a medical team on standby, and food that actually tasted like food instead of the cardboard sandwiches she'd been surviving on. But none of that mattered to her. All she could think about was getting back to Tommy. Daniel sat across from her, making phone call after phone call. He spoke to doctors, specialists, and lawyers with a calm authority that came from years of running a major company. But Lisa could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched between calls. He was scared, just as scared as she was, maybe more so. He was about to meet a son he never knew existed, and that son was fighting for his life. Tell me about him, Daniel said suddenly, putting his phone down. Tell me about Tommy, what's he like? Lisa looked up, surprised by the question. She'd been staring out the window, watching the clouds pass by. He's wonderful, she said softly, a small smile crossing her tired face. He's obsessed with dinosaurs. Has been since he was 2. He can name every single one you show him. Triceratops, Velociraptor, Stegosaurus. He knows them all. Daniel leaned forward, hanging on every word. What else? He's brave, Lisa continued, her voice catching slightly. Braver than any kid should have to be. He never complains during his treatments, even though I know they hurt. He just squeezes my hand and asks me to tell him dinosaur stories. And he's kind. Even when he's feeling terrible, he asks how other people are doing. He asked me if the neighbor's cat was eating enough because she looked skinny to him. He sounds incredible, Daniel said, his eyes glistening. He is. And he looks just like Claire. Same dark hair, same smile. But his eyes? Lisa paused, studying Daniel's face. His eyes are just like yours. They sat in silence for a moment. the weight of everything hanging between them. Finally, Lisa spoke again. Why did you give up looking for Claire? After a while, I mean. The investigators must have cost a fortune. Daniel sighed deeply. I didn't give up, exactly. But after about a year, everyone around me said I was obsessing over nothing. My business partners, my family, even my therapist. They said I was using this search as a way to avoid dealing with my divorce and other problems in my life. Maybe they were right. I don't know. But I kept having these dreams. Always the same. A little boy with that birthmark reaching out to me.
I could never reach him back. That's eerie, Lisa whispered. I know.
I sound crazy, but those dreams never stopped. And now I understand why. He looked out the window. Some part of me knew. Some part of me always knew I had a son out there. Lisa wanted to be angry at him, angry that he'd given up searching, angry that he hadn't found Claire when she needed help. But looking at his face, seeing the genuine pain there, she couldn't manage it. He hadn't known, and her sister had made sure of that. Claire was terrified of losing Tommy, Lisa said quietly. That's why she ran. In her mind, keeping him was worth more than anything else, even if it meant struggling, even if it meant he'd never know his father. She didn't trust that anyone would let her keep him if they knew the truth. I would have, Daniel said firmly. I would have supported both of them. I would have been there, I believe you. But Claire couldn't, not after everything she'd been through growing up. Fear does strange things to people. The plane began its descent into Montana. Lisa felt her heart rate pick up. She'd only been gone for 3 days, but it felt like a lifetime. She needed to see Tommy, needed to hold him and tell him that everything was going to be okay, and this time, she might actually be telling the truth. When they landed, a car was waiting to take them to the small trailer park where Lisa lived. The medical team followed in a separate vehicle, equipped with everything they needed for preliminary testing. As they drove through the familiar streets of her hometown, Lisa noticed Daniel taking everything in. The worn-down buildings, the struggling businesses, the obvious poverty that marked this corner of Montana. This is where Claire came back to, he said, more to himself than to Lisa. This is where she raised our son. She did the best she could, Lisa said defensively. I know. I'm not judging. I'm just trying to understand. They pulled up to the trailer and Lisa practically jumped out of the car before it fully stopped. She ran to the neighbor's unit next door and knocked urgently. Mrs. Patterson, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, opened the door. Her face fluttered with relief when she saw Lisa. Thank God you're back. He's been asking for you constantly. He's not doing well, honey. He's been so weak, Lisa's heart sank. Can I see him? Of course. He's sleeping on the couch. Lisa rushed inside and Daniel followed hesitantly. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times during the flight, but now that it was here, he felt frozen. What do you say to a child you've never met? A child who doesn't know you exist? And then he saw him. Tommy was curled up on an old worn couch covered with a blanket that had cartoon dinosaurs on it. His small chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Even in sleep, he looked pale and fragile. Dark circles shadowed his closed eyes, but Daniel could see it all. The resemblance was unmistakable. The shape of his face, the curve of his nose, and there on his left cheek, that crescent moon birthmark that had haunted Daniel's dreams. Lisa knelt beside the couch and gently touched Tommy's forehead. Hey, buddy, I'm back. Tommy's eyes fluttered open slowly. When he saw Lisa, a weak smile spread across his face. And Lisa, you came back. I missed you. I missed you too, sweetheart. I brought someone with me, someone who wants to help you feel better. Tommy's gaze shifted to Daniel, who stood a few feet away, trying to control the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. The little boy studied this stranger with curious but tired eyes. Hi, Tommy said softly. Are you a doctor? Daniel's voice caught in his throat. He cleared it and managed to speak. Nobody. I'm not a doctor, but I brought some doctors with me who are going to help you. My name is Daniel. That's a nice name, Tommy said. Then with the brutal honesty of a 3-year-old, he added, You look sad. Why are you sad? Daniel let out a surprised laugh that was half sob. He moved closer and knelt down beside the couch. I'm not sad, Tommy. I'm actually really happy to meet you. Do you like dinosaurs? Tommy asked, which was apparently his standard for measuring people. I do now, Daniel said with a genuine smile. What's your favorite? Daniel thought for a moment. He didn't know much about dinosaurs, but he remembered one from his childhood. I think Brachiosaurus, the really tall one with the long neck. Tommy's face lit up as much as it could in his weakened state. That's a good one. They were herbivores, which means they only ate plants. And they were really, really big. Bigger than my house. Is that right? You'll have to teach me more about them. Okay, Tommy agreed. Then he looked at Lisa. Aunt Lisa, I'm really tired. Can I have some water? Lisa quickly got him water while the medical team waited outside, giving them space. Daniel watched Tommy drink slowly, helped by Lisa, and felt a fierce protective instinct rise up in him. This was his son, his child, and he was sick. But Daniel had resources, connections, and determination. He would move heaven and earth to save him. After Tommy finished drinking, Daniel spoke gently. Tommy, those doctors I mentioned, they need to do a quick checkup on you, and they need to check me too. Is that okay? Tommy looked uncertain. Will it hurt? Maybe a tiny bit, Daniel said honestly. Like a small pinch. But I'll go first. You can watch. And after we're done, I'll tell you a story. Deal? What kind of story? A story about dinosaurs, of course. That sealed the deal. Tommy nodded and Daniel called in the medical team. They quickly set up their portable equipment in the small living room of the trailer. Daniel went first, as promised, rolling up his sleeve for the blood draw without flinching. Tommy watched carefully, his little face serious. Your turn, brave guy, the nurse said warmly to Tommy. Tommy held out his thin arm without complaint, though Lisa could see him tense up. She held his other hand while Daniel moved to his other side. Without thinking, Tommy reached up and grabbed Daniel's hand too, squeezing it tight during the needle stick. Something shifted in that moment. Some invisible connection clicked into place. Daniel squeezed back gently, fighting tears. This little boy, this stranger who was somehow not a stranger at all, trusted him enough to hold his hand. It was the smallest gesture, but it meant everything. After the blood samples were collected and labeled for rush DNA testing and compatibility analysis, the medical team stepped outside to make calls and begin processing. Daniel kept his promise and started telling Tommy a story about a brave Brachiosaurus who went on adventures. Tommy's eyes grew heavy as he listened, but he fought to stay awake. Daniel, he said sleepily. Yes, buddy? Will you stay? I like your stories. Daniel looked at Lisa, who nodded with tears in her eyes. I'm not going anywhere, Tommy, I promise. Good, Tommy murmured, his eyes closing. I think you're nice. Within minutes, Tommy was asleep again, still holding Daniel's hand. Daniel sat there on the floor next to the couch, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell had been cast in this tiny trailer in Montana. Lisa watched them together and saw what her sister had been so afraid of. But she also saw what her sister had denied Tommy, a father who clearly already loved him, a father who would fight for him. Outside, Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from the medical team lead. Preliminary blood work looked promising. Full DNA results would take a few hours, but the initial markers were a match. They could move forward. Daniel looked down at the sleeping child, still clutching his hand, at the birthmark that had led him here, at the son he'd found by accident in an airport terminal. We're going to save you, he whispered. I promise you, we're going to save you. And for the first time in 6 months, Lisa actually believed that might be true. The DNA results came back 6 hours later. Daniel had stayed by Tommy's side the entire time, watching the little boy sleep, memorizing every detail of his face. When his phone buzzed with the confirmation, he didn't feel surprised. He'd already known in his heart. But seeing it in black and white, seeing that 99.9% certainty, made it real in a way nothing else had. Tommy was his son, legally, scientifically, undeniably. The better news came right after. The preliminary compatibility testing showed that Daniel was a potential match for the bone marrow transplant. The doctors would need to run more detailed tests, but the initial markers were extremely promising. For the first time since this nightmare began, there was real hope. Lisa cried when she heard the news. Not sad tears this time, but tears of relief mixed with exhaustion and gratitude. She had carried this burden alone for so long, watching Tommy get weaker every day, feeling helpless and terrified. Now suddenly there was a path forward, but nothing in life is ever that simple. The next morning, while Tommy was eating breakfast and watching cartoons, Daniel received a phone call that made his expression darken. He stepped outside the trailer to take it, and when he came back in, Lisa could see the tension in every line of his body. What's wrong? She asked quietly. not wanting Tommy to overhear. Daniel glanced at Tommy, who was absorbed in his show, then motioned for Lisa to follow him outside. Once they were away from the trailer, he let out a frustrated breath. That was my lawyer. My ex-wife found out about Tommy. How? We've only known for a day. Someone from the medical team must have talked. Or maybe someone at the airport. Doesn't matter how. What matters is that Victoria knows and she's not happy about it. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. What does that mean? Daniel ran his hand through his hair. A gesture Lisa was learning meant he was stressed. Victoria and I divorced 3 years ago. It wasn't friendly. Her family owns significant shares in my company. They're major stakeholders, and now she's threatening to make this difficult. Difficult how? You're trying to save your son's life, I know. But Victoria sees it differently. She's claiming that this is going to cause a scandal that will damage the company's reputation. She's talking about calling an emergency board meeting. Her lawyers are already drafting papers. Lisa felt anger rising in her chest. So what? Let them have their meeting. Tommy needs you. That's more important than any company. You're right, it is. But you don't understand how these things work. Victoria's family can make things very complicated. They can tie up resources, freeze assets, make it harder for me to access funds quickly. And we need to move fast with Tommy. Every day counts. Are you saying you can't help him? Lisa's voice rose with panic. No, Daniel said firmly, gripping her shoulders. No, I'm saying they're going to try to make me choose between my company and my son. And that's not even a choice. But I need you to understand that things might get messy. There might be lawyers, media attention, people trying to dig into your past and Tommy's past. I need to know if you're prepared for that. Lisa thought about it for maybe 2 seconds. I don't care what they do to me. I don't care if they dig up every embarrassing thing I've ever done. All I care about is Tommy. If you can save him, I'll deal with whatever else comes. Daniel smiled and some of the tension left his face. Good, because I'm going to need your help. We're going to transfer Tommy to a hospital in New York, the best pediatric hospital in the country. I'm going to undergo the transplant procedure, and we're going to save our boy. And if my ex-wife and her family want to fight about it, they can do it while I'm recovering from surgery. Our boy, Lisa repeated softly. You said our boy. He is, isn't he? You've raised him for 3 years. You've been there for every moment. I might be his biological father, but you're his parent too. This isn't about replacing you. It's about both of us giving him what he needs. Lisa felt tears prick her eyes again. She'd been so afraid that Daniel would swoop in and push her aside, that he'd use his money and power to take Tommy away from her. But instead, he was including her, valuing her role in Tommy's life. Thank you, she whispered. They went back inside to find Tommy looking at them with worried eyes. Kids always know when adults are stressed, no matter how much you try to hide it. Is everything okay? Tommy asked in his small voice. Daniel knelt down beside him. Everything's okay, buddy. Actually, I have some news. How would you like to go on an adventure? Tommy's eyes widened slightly. What kind of adventure? We're going to go to New York City, to a really special hospital where some of the best doctors in the world are going to help you feel better. Will it hurt? Daniel appreciated that Tommy asked the hard questions directly. No sugarcoating, just honest concern. Some of it might hurt a little bit, but you'll be asleep for the big stuff. And when you wake up, you're going to start feeling better and better. Strong enough to see real dinosaur bones in a museum. Strong enough to run and play again. Tommy considered this seriously. Will you be there? Every single day. I promise. Will Aunt Lisa be there too? Lisa moved closer and took his hand. Wild horses couldn't drag me away. What about Mrs. Patterson's cat? Who will feed her? Even in the midst of everything, Tommy was worried about the neighbor's cat. Lisa laughed through fresh tears. Mrs. Patterson can take care of her own cat, sweetheart. Don't you worry about that. Okay, Tommy said finally. I'll go. But can I bring my dinosaur books? You can bring every single dinosaur book you own, Daniel promised. The next few days were a whirlwind. Daniel arranged for a medical transport plane equipped with everything Tommy might need during the flight. He hired nurses to monitor him constantly. He made sure Lisa had everything she needed too: clothes, toiletries, anything she could possibly want. When Lisa protested that it was too much, Daniel just looked at her and said, You've been surviving on nothing for months taking care of my son. Let me do this. The transfer to New York happened quickly. Tommy was set up in a private room at the pediatric hospital, with windows overlooking the city. The room was filled with get-well balloons and stuffed dinosaurs that Daniel's assistant had rushed to buy. Tommy's eyes had gone wide when he saw it all. The medical team ran extensive tests on both Daniel and Tommy. The full compatibility analysis took 2 days, and those were the longest 2 days of Daniel's life. He stayed at the hospital sleeping on a cot in Tommy's room, much to the nurses' amusement. They tried to get him to go home and rest, but he refused to leave. Lisa stayed too, in a separate room Daniel had arranged for her. She spent her days with Tommy, reading him stories, playing with toy dinosaurs, and trying to keep his spirits up. In the evenings, after Tommy fell asleep, she and Daniel would sit in the family lounge and talk. About Claire, about the past, about their fears and hopes for the future. "I keep thinking about what Claire would say," Lisa admitted one night. "If she could see all this, you being here, Tommy getting the help he needs, part of me thinks she'd be grateful, but another part thinks she'd be angry at me for breaking my promise." "You didn't break your promise," Daniel said gently. "You did what you had to do to save Tommy's life. Claire would understand that." "What mother wouldn't?" "I hope you're right." On the 3rd day, the doctors called them both into a consultation room. Tommy was napping, monitored by nurses. Lisa's heart hammered in her chest as they sat down. This was it. The moment of truth. Dr. Richardson, the head of the pediatric oncology department, smiled at them. "I have good news. Daniel, you're a match. Not just a potential match. You're an excellent match. The compatibility is about as good as we could possibly hope for between a parent and child." Lisa grabbed Daniel's hand without thinking. He squeezed back hard. "So we can do the transplant?" Daniel asked. "We can. We'll need to prepare both of you. Daniel, you'll undergo the bone marrow extraction procedure. It's not pleasant, but you'll be under anesthesia. Tommy will receive the transplant the same day. Then comes the hard part, the waiting. We'll need to monitor him closely to make sure his body accepts the transplant and doesn't reject it. But I have to tell you, with a match this good, I'm very optimistic." For the first time in what felt like forever, Lisa allowed herself to feel real hope. Not just desperate clutching at straws hope, but genuine belief that Tommy was going to be okay. But that evening, just as they were celebrating the good news with Tommy by showing him pictures of all the museums they'd visit once he was better, Daniel's phone rang. It was his lawyer, and the news wasn't good. Victoria had made her move. She'd called an emergency board meeting for the day of the scheduled transplant surgery. She was demanding that Daniel attend in person or face immediate removal as CEO. Her family's shares, combined with a few board members she'd managed to persuade, gave her enough votes to make it happen. Daniel listened to his lawyer explain the situation, his jaw clenching tighter with every word. When he hung up, he looked at Lisa with determination in his eyes. "She wants me to choose between saving my son and saving my company. What are you going to do?" Lisa asked, though she thought she already knew the answer. Daniel looked through the window at Tommy, who was arranging plastic dinosaurs on his hospital bed, making them talk to each other in different voices. That little boy who loved dinosaurs, who held hands with strangers, who worried about a neighbor's cat even when he was sick. That was his son, his child. "There's no choice," Daniel said quietly. "She can have the company. She can have all of it. I'm staying with Tommy." Lisa felt her eyes fill with tears for what must have been the 100th time that week. "You'd give up everything you've built?" "I'd give up everything I own for him. The company, the money, all of it. None of it means anything if I lose him. None of it ever meant anything, really. I just didn't know that until now." He walked over to Tommy's room and sat down on the edge of the bed. Tommy looked up at him with those big, trusting eyes. "Hey, buddy, guess what? The doctors say we can do the transplant soon. We're going to make you all better." Tommy smiled, that beautiful smile that lit up his whole face despite his illness. "Really? And then we can go see the dinosaurs?" "Every single dinosaur in every single museum," Daniel promised. "It's a deal." And in that moment, with his son smiling at him and Lisa watching from the doorway, Daniel knew he'd made the right choice. Some things were worth more than money or power or companies. Some things were worth everything. The morning of the transplant arrived on a Tuesday. Rain streaked down the hospital windows, creating patterns that Tommy watched while the nurses prepared him for surgery. He seemed remarkably calm for a 3-year-old about to undergo a major medical procedure. Lisa sat beside his bed, holding his small hand, trying to keep her own fears from showing on her face. Daniel was in a prep room down the hall, getting ready for his own procedure. The bone marrow extraction would take a few hours, and then they would immediately transplant it into Tommy. The timing had to be perfect. Everything had to go exactly right. "Aunt Lisa," Tommy said quietly, "is Daniel scared?" Lisa was surprised by the question. "Maybe a little bit." "Are you scared?" Tommy nodded slowly. "A little bit." But Daniel said brave people can still be scared. They just do the thing anyway. He's absolutely right about that. You're one of the bravest people I know. Daniel's brave too, Tommy said with certainty. He's going to help me get better. Just then, Daniel appeared in the doorway. He was wearing a hospital gown and had an IV line already attached to his arm, but he'd insisted on seeing Tommy before they both went into surgery. The nurses had tried to protest, but one look at his face told them it wasn't worth arguing about. He walked over to Tommy's bed and sat down carefully. "Hey, buddy. You ready for our adventure?" "I think so." "Will it hurt?" "You won't feel anything. You'll be asleep the whole time. And when you wake up, the hardest part will be over. Then you just have to rest and get stronger." Tommy reached out and touched the IV in Daniel's arm. "Does yours hurt?" "Just a little pinch. Nothing I can't handle." "You're brave," Tommy said matter-of-factly. Daniel's eyes got misty. "So are you, kiddo." "So are you." A nurse appeared at the door. "I'm sorry, but we really need to get both of you to the operating rooms. It's time." Daniel leaned down and kissed Tommy's forehead, right next to that crescent moon birthmark. "I'll see you on the other side, buddy. Dream about dinosaurs for me." "Okay. See you later, Daniel." As they wheeled Tommy away toward his operating room, Lisa walked with Daniel toward his. She had never been more terrified in her life, but she tried to keep her voice steady. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this. For finding us. For saving him." "You saved him first," Daniel replied. "You kept him alive long enough for me to find you both. I'm just finishing what you started." They reached his operating room and the medical team was waiting. Daniel looked at Lisa one more time. "If something goes wrong with me, make sure Tommy knows I wanted to do this. Make sure he knows I loved him from the moment I saw that photograph." "Nothing's going to go wrong," Lisa said firmly. "You're both going to be fine. You have to be." Daniel smiled, squeezed her hand once, and let the nurses wheel him into the operating room. The next 6 hours were the longest of Lisa's life. She sat in the family waiting room, unable to read, unable to watch TV, unable to do anything but stare at the clock and pray. Other families came and went. Some received good news, some received bad news. Life and death happened in this hospital every single day, and today, Tommy's fate hung in the balance. Finally, Dr. Richardson appeared. Lisa jumped to her feet, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. "Both procedures went perfectly," the doctor said with a tired but genuine smile. "Daniel is in recovery and the transplant has been completed. Tommy received the bone marrow and his body is responding exactly as we hoped. Now comes the critical part. We need to monitor him closely over the next several weeks to ensure his body accepts the transplant and doesn't reject it." Lisa felt her knees go weak with relief. "Can I see them?" "Daniel will be waking up soon. Tommy will be unconscious for a few more hours. But yes, you can see them both." Lisa went to Daniel first. He was already starting to come around, his eyes fluttering open as she entered the recovery room. When he saw her, he managed a weak smile. "Tommy?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "The transplant went perfectly. He's going to be okay, Daniel. He's going to be okay." Daniel closed his eyes and tears leaked out from beneath his lids. "Thank God, thank God." Lisa sat beside him and took his hand. They stayed like that for a while, not speaking, just being present in the relief of the moment. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "My lawyer called while I was in pre-op. The board meeting happened. Victoria convinced them to vote me out as CEO. "I'm so sorry," Lisa said. "Don't be. I'm not." Daniel opened his eyes and looked at her with complete certainty. "I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. The company was just a company. Tommy is my son." Something unexpected happened that afternoon. One of the board members, an older man named Richard who had been with Daniel's company since the beginning, resigned in protest of the vote. He held a press conference and explained exactly what had happened. How Daniel had been forced to choose between saving his dying son's life and attending a board meeting. How Victoria had orchestrated the whole thing out of spite. The media coverage was immediate and intense. But instead of the scandal Victoria had hoped for, public opinion swung dramatically in Daniel's favor. Social media exploded with support. Hashtags appeared. People shared their own stories of choosing family over career. Daniel became a symbol of something bigger than just one man's choice. Within 48 hours, 3 more board members resigned. Major shareholders began calling for Victoria to step down. The company's stock actually rose because investors respected Daniel's priorities, and by the end of the week, the remaining board members were begging Daniel to return as CEO once he'd recovered. But Daniel wasn't thinking about any of that. He was focused entirely on Tommy. The little boy woke up from surgery confused and in pain. The first few days were hard. There were complications, moments when his fever spiked and the doctors looked worried. Lisa and Daniel took turns staying by his bedside, holding his hand, reading him stories, reminding him that he was loved. Slowly, gradually, Tommy began to improve. His color started coming back. His energy returned in small increments. 2 weeks after the transplant, he ate solid food for the first time. 3 weeks after, he sat up in bed and asked for his dinosaur books. 4 weeks after, he walked around his hospital room without getting tired. The doctors were amazed at how well his body was accepting the transplant. Dr. Richardson said she'd rarely seen such a successful outcome, especially so quickly. Tommy was going to make a full recovery. 6 months after that day in the airport when Lisa collapsed and Daniel found her photograph, Tommy was declared to be in remission. He was healthy. He was strong. He was going to live a normal life. They celebrated by going to the Natural History Museum just like Daniel had promised. Tommy stood in front of the massive dinosaur skeletons with wonder in his eyes, his hand held firmly in Daniel's while Lisa took pictures on her phone. "Look how big they are," Tommy exclaimed. "Even bigger than I thought." "Pretty impressive, huh?" Daniel said, grinning. "This is the best day ever," Tommy declared. Daniel looked over at Lisa, who was smiling through happy tears. "Yeah, buddy, it really is." Daniel had returned to his company but with new conditions. He worked reasonable hours. He never missed dinner with Tommy. He made sure Lisa was taken care of, setting up a trust fund for her and helping her enroll in nursing school. She discovered during Tommy's treatment that she had a gift for helping people, and she wanted to pursue it. They bought a house together in Brooklyn with enough space for everyone. Not because Daniel and Lisa were romantic partners, they weren't, but because they were family now. Tommy needed both of them, and they needed each other. On what would have been Claire's birthday, the 3 of them visited her grave. Daniel had arranged for a beautiful headstone with dinosaurs carved into it, because that's what Claire's son loved. Tommy placed flowers on the grave and talked to his mother about everything that had happened. "I have a dad now, Mom," Tommy said to the headstone. "His name is Daniel and he saved my life. Aunt Lisa says you would have liked him. I think so too. He tells good stories and he's learning all about dinosaurs so we can talk about them together." Daniel stood there with his hand on his son's shoulder, grateful beyond words to a woman he'd barely known, but who had given him the greatest gift imaginable. Claire had been wrong about one thing. She'd been wrong to run. But she'd been right about the only thing that really mattered. She'd protected Tommy with everything she had. As they walked back to the car, Tommy between them holding both their hands, Daniel thought about that moment in the airport. The moment when he'd picked up a photograph and his entire life had changed direction. Some people might call it fate. Others might call it coincidence. Daniel didn't care what it was called. All he knew was that he'd found his son. And in the process, he'd found himself. The corporate success, the money, the power, none of it had made him whole. But this little boy with his dinosaur obsession and his brave heart and his crescent moon birthmark, he had changed everything. Tommy looked up at him and smiled. "Daniel, can we get ice cream?" "Absolutely." "What flavor do you want?" "Chocolate." "No, wait, vanilla?" "No, both." "Both it is." Daniel laughed. Lisa watched them together and thought about how far they'd all come. From a desperate girl collapsing in an airport to this moment right here. A family. Not a traditional one maybe, but a real one nonetheless. Sometimes the worst moments of your life lead to the best ones. Sometimes losing everything helps you find what really matters. And sometimes when you're at your lowest point, a stranger picks up a photograph and everything changes. For Daniel, Lisa, and Tommy, that photograph had been the beginning of everything. A family reborn from loss, held together by love that crossed every boundary, and saved by a father who proved that some choices are easy when you know what truly matters. The dinosaurs could wait. The museums would always be there. But these moments, these precious moments of being together, of being a family, of being alive and healthy and happy, these were the moments worth everything.